In this video, I will be teaching you some valuable Python scripting skills by running you through a complete project. Specifically, I will be showing you how to deal with command line arguments, how you can copy different files or directories, search for different files or directories, use modules like OS, SYS, subprocess, and a bunch of other modules that are very helpful when you're trying to create Python scripts that can automate workflows and just make your life easier. Personally, just knowing a few of these commands has helped me and saved me countless hours in different development projects, and the project that I'm actually working on here with you is kind of a variation of something I actually had to do when I was working for my startup and creating kind of an advanced script that had to go through and automatically compile a bunch of code for me. Anyways, I think you guys will find some great value in this. So with that said, let's get into the video after a quick word from our sponsor. Before we get started, I need to thank Linode for sponsoring this video. I've been using and working with Linode for nearly 3 years now, and they've consistently been my go-to choice for hosting my applications and servers. In fact, right now I'm using Linode to host the official Tech with Tim Discord bot, a website, multiple of my domains, and a Kubernetes cluster. Now, Linode was just recently acquired by Akamai, and as a part of this acquisition, they're going to be adding more than a dozen new data centers around the world in the next year. Linode makes it super easy to spin up servers with their one-click app marketplace and have tons of written guides and YouTube videos on their channel to help you get started. Now, if you're having any issues, you can reach out to their 24/7 support team and actually talk with a real human being. Now, Linode's pricing is simple with no hidden fees and full transparency, and you can test out Linode services for free by using the link in the description and claiming an $100 60-day credit for any new accounts. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with Linode over the past few years, and one last thank you to them for sponsoring this video. Alright, so let's dive into this project. I just quickly want to mention, if you don't already know, I do have a programming course. It's called programmingexpert.io. Great place to become a software engineer and learn how to code specifically in Python and Go. Check it out if you haven't already. I'll leave a link in the description. All right, so let me start by walking you through the project that we're going to complete. Now, this is a project that kind of mocks what you would be doing in a real world scenario. Obviously, I don't know what you guys need to automate or what scripts you need to write. So I've tried to create something that's very general that allows you to get a bunch of knowledge in a ton of different areas. So this may not cover everything you need to do, but it will give you a ton of that base knowledge and show you what's possible with Python scripting and how you can kind of set up these scripts to be as effective as possible and what commands you should be using for a lot of the common operations. So let's have a look at it here. First thing that I want to look at is just the directory I have on the left side of my screen. Now, you guys can download this by going to my GitHub. I will leave a link in the description, of course, and just clone the repository, download the repository, and get access to this data directory here. Now, this data directory is going to kind of simulate kind of a large project, some code or some files that you would already have and that you want to traverse through and do something specifically with. Now, that's usually what automation is or scripting is for me in Python. It's going through some existing data or an existing file structure and kind of parsing things out, grabbing specific data, looking for certain names or writing code into different files. So I've tried to kind of emulate that here. So you can see we have this data directory here, and inside of here, I have a bunch of stuff, right? I have some empty directories. I have some directories that are representing kind of games that would be written in Go. I have some random Python files. They're just empty, just for example purposes. I have a text file. I have another kind of Go file here, and you can see that there's a bunch of stuff in this directory. Now, what we're interested in here for this kind of mock project is parsing out all of the game directories. So what we want to do is want to take all of the games that are inside of this directory. We want to copy these into a new directory. We want to change the names of the directories such that we don't have this game kind of suffix on them. And then we want to compile all of the game code that exists inside of these game directories. Now, this is something I actually had to do when I was working for my startup, as I mentioned in the intro. So I've kind of put a variation on it here. Now, to go even a step further, once we get all of this game data, we parse it out, we put it into a new directory, and we compile all of the code. I want to write a JSON file into that directory that gives us some metadata or information about what we just did. So how many games are there? What are the name of our game directories, etc. And that's something that we could kind of quickly look at to get a summary of the information. So you could imagine this would be something similar to what you may want to do when you are writing your own Python scripts. Okay, so I have kind of the project text here. Excuse any spelling mistakes that are in this file, but I just wanted to walk you through very organized, step-by-step what we're going to be doing. So some assumptions here, sorry. The data directory contains many files and directories. So imagine this is massive, right? There's a ton of different code in here, and it's not feasible for us to do this manually. We want to have a script that automatically does it for us. Obviously, that's not really the case here, but again, kind of picture that we had, thousands of files. In that case, it would be very helpful to have a script to help us do this. You are only interested in the games contained in this directory, so you don't care about the rest of the junk in there. You just want the games, which are going to be stored in a directory that contains the word games. So whenever we see the word game, and that's in the directory name, then we know that we're interested in that directory. Next, each game directory contains a single .go file that must be compiled before it can be run. Okay, perfect, that makes sense. And these Go files could be named different things. Notice one is called main, one is called code, one is called file. So we're gonna have to do kind of special stuff to handle these different names and compile all of this code. Okay, so now what are we gonna do for this project? Well, we're gonna find all of the game directories from the data directory. We're going to create a new /games directory, or whatever we want to call it, that's going to contain all of our game code. We're going to copy and remove the game suffix of all of the games into the games directory. So that means copy the directory, strip off that kind of game aspect of it, put it into the new directory. We're going to create a JSON file with the information about the games. So how many games, what the game names are, etc. We're going to compile all of the game code and then run all of the game code. Now, we may not actually run it here, but we will, at minimum, go to the compile step. Perfect. So the only thing we need to do here to get started is make sure we have Python installed. I'm going to be using Python 3.9, I believe, but I think anything above 3.8 should work. And if you want to be able to compile and run this Go code, then what I'm going to suggest to you is that you download a Go interpreter or compiler. So let me just bring this up here, Go code. I'll leave this link in the description as well, but if you go to go.dev, pretty simple URL, click download, it will download and install Go. It will automatically add it to your path. Then you'll have access to the Go command that we'll be using later in the video. Last thing, if you want, there's some helpful extensions here in VS Code. If you're using VS Code, you probably want to install the Python extension and the Go extension as well. Okay, so now that we've got through that, let's start writing our code. So I have a Python file here called getGameData. You can call this whatever you want. And notice I've put this in the same directory as where my data directory is. Now you don't need to do that, but it is going to be helpful to have it kind of close to the data directory so you know the path to where that is. So again, if you want, go to the GitHub. I'll leave that link in the description. Download this code. It will have the finished code as well, but you can just kind of delete the file and write it along with me if you want. And then you'll have this data directory, so you don't have to kind of create this on your own. So you want to work in a Python file that is in the same directory as the data directory. Now, the first thing we're going to do here is just import a bunch of modules that we're going to be using. So we're going to import the OS module, which I believe stands for operating system. We're going to import JSON, which is how we're going to work with JSON files. We're going to import shutil, which is going to allow us to kind of do some copy and overwrite operations. We're going to say from subprocess import, and we're going to import pipe and run. Now this is going to allow us to run really any terminal command that we want. So we can, for example, compile and run the Go code using this. And then we are going to import sys, which we are going to use to get access to the command line arguments. So the very first thing I want to start by doing here, if we go back to our project text, is we want to find all of the game directories from some directory. In this case, is called /data. We want to create a new directory, some kind of target directory where we're going to be copying this into. So what I want to do is I want to grab from command line arguments what the source directory and the target directory is relative to the current path so that I know where I should be storing kind of all of the games that I find and where I should be looking for those games to make this script a bit dynamic. So what is a command line argument? Well, let me just show you down here in the terminal. So a command line argument is something like Python. I pass my file name, so get game data, and then I do something like hello world. Okay, so hello and world are command line arguments. You've seen this before whenever you've ran any command, like when you make a folder, mkdir, and then you put the folder name is a command line argument. So in this case, we might do something like Python get game data, then we pass /data, which is going to be our source directory, and then we pass something like /new games or something like that, and that's our output or target directory. So I want to show you how we can parse out those command line arguments. So to do that, we're going to use the system module. So first I'm going to say if __name is equal to __ main. Then in here, I'm going to grab the command line arguments. Now, the reason I'm using this is because I only want to execute the main script here if I'm running this Python file directly. If I'm not directly running this Python file, I don't want to be executing the code that's going to run through and do all of our operations. Otherwise, if we tried to import the Python file and we didn't have this line, it would go ahead and run all of that code when we don't want that to happen. So when you have this here, this just checks that you ran the file directly, and it won't execute anything in here if you were importing, say, a function or a class or something from this file. Hopefully that makes sense. But what I'll do here is say args is equal to sys.argv, okay? Now, just to show you how this works, we'll print out args, and let's run our code. So I'm going to say Python, get game data, data, new data. Okay, hit enter, and notice that my command line arguments are, first of all, the name of the Python file, and then I have my two command line arguments, so data and new data that I passed here. Now, if you are on Mac, you will probably need to run Python 3 get game data. Okay, so now that we have our arguments, I want to make sure that we have a valid number of arguments, which in this case is going to be 3. 3 because we have the file name, and then we have the 2 extra arguments, and we want to make sure we have those 2 extra arguments. So I'm going to go here and say if the len of args does not equal 3, then I will raise an exception. And here I will say you must pass a source and target directory only. Okay, so that's fine. So now if we run our code here and I only pass, for example, the source directory, then notice that I get my exception. If I pass my target as well, then all is good. Okay, so now I want to get my source and target directory. So I'm going to say source target is equal to sys.argv. And then I'm going to do 1 colon like this. And actually, we can put this as args. Now, the reason I'm doing 1 is just to strip off the name of our Python file, which we don't want, and just get the 2 arguments here and then store them in separate variables. Okay, now that we've done that, I'm going to create a function. And this main function is going to accept our source, okay, and our target. And I don't know if that's actually the right thing that we want to call it. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Source is where we're looking. Target is where we want to put our new directory. So that's fine. We can leave it like that. And then here we'll go and call the main, passing our source and target directory names. Perfect. Now that we have done that, what we actually need to do here before we go any further is we need to create a complete path from the location where we're running our Python file to whatever this directory is. So in the case where I pass, data or target, well, I want to get the full qualified path from, say, like my C drive all the way to this directory so that it's going to work in my program. If I just try to use data or I just try to use target, we can get some weird errors depending on what operating system we're running on. So what I'm going to do here is say my source_path is equal to os.path.join. And the first thing we need here is the current working directory, which I can get by using the command. I got to check my cheat sheet here because I always forget. os.getCwd. Okay, so I'm going to join the path of CWD and my source directory. Now, you should always use os.path.join when you're trying to create paths. Don't think you're going to be clever here and have a path like, C drive : / and then you add, like you're doing a string concatenation. Don't do that. The reason you should not do a string concatenation is because if you're working on different operating systems, the path dividers are different. When you use os.path.join, it automatically will join the path based on the operating system you're working on. So you always want to use this. Don't do string concatenations to try to create paths. It might work sometimes, but it's not kind of a good practice to do that. Okay, so we've created our source path. Now, to explain this line here, CWD is our current working directory, which means the directory we ran this Python file from. So wherever we ran this Python file from, that's the working directory. So in this case, it's going to be users, Tim, desktop, Python scripting. Then whatever these paths are going to be relative to that working directory. So I combine them together, right? So now the directory will be this, and then it will have my source, which would be data, right? And then the next one will be my target. Okay, so let's copy this and make this target and change this here to be target. Okay, so now we have our source path and our target path. Now, what do I need to do next here? Well, I need to find all of the game directories from my source directory. So let's write a function that can do that. We'll say find all game dirs like that. We need to know where to look, so we'll go source. Okay, now I'm going to create a variable up here, and this is going to specify what we're looking for in our directory. So like what needs to be in their name. So in this case, I'm going to say game dir pattern is equal to, and we'll just call this game, which essentially means we're going to look for the string game in any directories, and that will tell us that we want that directory, right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to essentially walk through the source directory, look at all the files and directories, and then match any directories that have this game in them. And if we have that, then we'll add them to a list, we'll return them, etc. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to say my game underscore paths is equal to, and this is going to be a, just an empty list. And actually, I want to change this to say find all game paths, because it's going to give us the full path, not just the directory name. Next, I'm going to say for root, I believe this is going to be dirs files in os.walk, and I'm going to walk the source path, okay? Now, what walk will do is walk recursively through whatever the source directory is that you pass to this os.walk command. So it's going to give you the root directory, the directories, and the files that are contained in the current level that it's walking through. Now, what this will do is recursively continue to look. So in this case, it'll look in data, but then it would, after looking in data, look inside of blank, then look inside of hello world, then look inside of rock, paper, scissors game. It would look through all of those directories. Now, we only care about the directories that are immediately inside of data. However, if you wanted to recursively look through all of them, this is what you would use, hence why I'm showing it to you here. Now, since we only care about the first kind of top level directory, we only really need to run this command one time. So at the end of my for loop, I'm just going to put a break so that I only do this once. And this is just an easy way for me to grab kind of all of the values one time, right? So we just break at the end of the for loop. So we only run this one time. Okay, now that we've done this, we need to loop through all of the directories. So I'm going to say for, and you should not use dir because that's a built-in command. So I'm going to say directory in dirs like that. And then I want to get the name of my directory and match that against my game dir pattern. So what I will do is say if my game dir pattern is in my directory.lower, and I'll put this lowercase just in case we have a capital game or like a capital on the G or something like that. You don't have to do this, but I think it makes sense to do that. If this is the case, then I'm going to add this path to my game paths. So what I will do here is say my path is equal to os.path.join. And then I'm going to take my source and I'm going to take my directory like this. And I'm going to say game paths dot append my path. Okay. Then down here, we will return our game paths. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because this dirs list here gives me all of the names of directories, not the paths to those directories. Now here, I want the full path. The reason I want the full path is so that I can easily copy it later on. If I don't have the full path, I can still create that full path, but it's just easier to return all of the full paths right now. So that's why I'm doing it. So I'm saying path is equal to os.path.join, taking my base path where I know this directory is contained inside of, and then I'm joining them together, right? Taking the directory name, adding it to the base, and then adding this to my array or list of paths, and then I will return that. Fantastic. So let's try this out now and make sure that this works. So let's say our game underscore paths is equal to find all game paths, and then we'll pass here the source path, and we'll print our game paths. Okay, so let's give this a shot here and see if we get any errors or not. So here we're going to pass data. That's going to be our source directory. So make sure you have data there. And then target will be our target, although it doesn't matter right now. All right, so notice now that I get my full paths to all of the directories that contain the name game. So I have my hello world, I have my rock, paper, scissors game, and I have my Simon Says game. Now notice that I've ignored the blank directory, I've ignored any files, even if my file had the name game inside of it, because I was only looking in directories. Fantastic. Okay, so that is working. The next thing that I want to do here is I want to take all of these paths, and I essentially want to just get the new directory name that I want to copy these directories to. I know this seems a bit weird, but remember what we're doing here is we're taking all of these directories and we're copying them into a new directory, but we're removing the game part from that directory name. So when I copy, Simon Says Game, I'm just going to copy Simon Says, not the game part, into a new directory. So I need to get that kind of destination path before I can perform that copy. Because to do a copy, I need a source, I need a destination. Right now we just have the source, so we have to create the destination. Now, one thing we also have to do is create the new directory, and we can actually create the new directory right now. So let's make a new function here and say create_dir. And all we'll take for this is the path to the directory that we want to create. Inside of here, I'm first going to check if this directory exists. If it exists, I don't need to create it. If it doesn't exist, then I will create it. So I'm going to say if not, and then this is os dot, actually, is this going to be, I think it's os.path.exists. Yes, okay, that's correct. So if this does not exist, then I will say os.mkdir, which stands for make directory, and then I will make the directory at this path. Okay, that's it for creating the directory. So let's go here and let's say create dir, and the directory that we want to create is going to be the target path, right? So we'll just pass the target path there, sorry. Okay, next, we want to get all of those destination paths. So I need to make a function that is essentially going to look at this whole path, and it's just going to give me the directory name, but removing the game aspect. Now, I know this seems a bit backwards how I'm doing it. I'm doing it intentionally so that I can show you how you strip apart paths and take like certain components of the path. So believe me, I know there is an easier way to do this, but I'm trying to show you like how you can use a lot of different commands here. So hopefully you appreciate it. Anyways, let me just quickly look at my cheat sheet here, okay? And I'm going to say that this is called get name from paths. And I'm going to take in my paths, and I'm going to take in what I want to strip off of my directory name. So I'll call that toStrip. I don't really know what else we would call that. Okay, so I'm going to go here and say new names is equal to an array. And I'm going to say for path in paths. Now what I want to do is I want to split my path into just the directory and the base part, right? So like the parent directory of just the directory. Because remember, we have the full entire path. So when we had game paths, we have the entire path to the game directory. So we're going to split it to just the game directory and then whatever that base path is. Now, the way we do that is we can say underscore because we don't care about the beginning part. And then we can say dir underscore name is equal to os.path.split. And then we can just split the path. Now, this is automatically just going to give you the very last aspect of the path, whether it's a directory or a file or whatever it is, and then the remaining part of the path on the left side. Again, don't try to get clever and do this yourself by splitting different like slashes or trying to find the path divider. Just use these built-in functions because they handle the different operating systems for you. Okay, so now we have the dir name. Now what we need to do is remove the game aspect or whatever aspect from this dir name. So I will say new dir name is equal to my dir name dot replace, and I'll replace whatever the toStrip string is that we pass, which will be game, with an empty string, which will just get rid of it from the directory. Then I will say new names dot append my new dir name. Then I will return my new names. Fantastic. Okay, so now let's get our new names. So let's say new game dirs is equal to get name from paths, and our paths are going to be the game paths, and to strip, we're just going to strip off the string game. Fantastic. Now let's print our new game dirs. All right, now notice I have create directory as well, so we should see that a new directory gets created here when I run this. Let's try it and see what we get. And notice now that we get hello world, rock, paper, scissors, Simon Says, plus the target directory was created. So I'll delete that so we can create again later. Okay, now we do have the underscore here. Now that makes sense, right? Because we're just looking for game. Now in this case, we can look for underscore game and we can remove that entire thing, but it's up to you how you want to do this, right? If you look for underscore game, then if you started the directory name with just game, it wouldn't count or it wouldn't remove it. So you could do some advanced logic to remove this if you want, but for now, we'll just make it underscore game. I think you guys know what I'm saying here. Okay, so let's clear that. And what do we need to do next? Well, now that we have our kind of destination, our source directories for all the games, as well as where we want to put these games, now we need to, well, we need to write them, right? Like we need to actually do the copy operation. So what I'm going to do is make a new directory or new function, not directory, and I'm going to call this copy. Okay. Now what copy is going to do is take a source and a destination, and it's going to copy the source into the destination. Now I will actually kind of change this a little bit, and I will say copy and overwrite. Now the reason for this is that if the directory already exists, I want to overwrite it, and I will show you how we can do that. Now, keep in mind the commands I'm going to use here are just one option to do this. There's like a million ways you can go about copying and deleting directories, but I'm going to show you how we delete a directory if it already exists, and then, of course, how we copy it. And this will be a recursive copy, which will copy everything. So if there was another directory inside, it would copy that directory as well and all of the contents of that directory. A lot of the copy operations don't do that, so just keep in mind if you want a recursive copy, you probably want to use the option I'm showing you here. So I'm going to say if os.path.exists destination, then I need to start by removing the destination folder, which I'm going to use my shutil for. So I'm going to say shutil.rmtree, which stands for remove tree, which is essentially a recursive delete. And this is going to be the destination. Now after this, I will say hutil.copyTree, and then I will copy the source to the destination. All right, that's all good. That's all we need for copying and overwriting, or overriding, however you want to. I think overwrite is the correct term there. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can use this function. So we need to essentially loop through all of the different paths that we have, so the source paths as well as the destination paths, and then we need to run this copy command. So I'm going to say for, and we'll call this src destination in. I'm going to use this zip function. I'll explain how this works in 1 second, but I'm going to pass my game paths and my new game directories. I'm going to start by saying my destination path is equal to os.path.join, and I'm going to join my target path with my destination folder name. Then I will run the copy and overwrite function with my src and my destination path. Okay, so let me explain how zip works. What zip will do is it will take matching elements from two arrays and combine them into a tuple, which then gives me access to them at the same time. So notice, right, these arrays or these lists are going to be the same length. So this first one is going to be all of the original game paths, and this is going to be our new game directory names that have this _game removed. Now I want to be getting the game path associated with the new game directory name because I want to copy whatever's here into this new directory name. So I zip them together. So to show you a quick example, if we have 1, 2, 3, and we have like A, B, C, then if you zip these together, what you're going to get is an array that has 1 and A, or a tuple, sorry, that has 1 and A, 2 and B, etc. It just combines them together. So the matching elements at their indices get kind of matched up, and that's why I can say source destination here and iterate through the zip. Okay, so now this should actually be good. However, I need to make sure that I create this directory before I do this. Otherwise, we're going to get an error where it says our path doesn't exist. Okay, so let me slow down for 1 sec. I'll explain what we've done. We can run it, and then we can continue. So what we've done here, right, is we've gotten the source path as well as the directory path. We have found all of the game paths that we're interested in, so essentially those directories from the source directory. We have then found what we want our new game directory names to be. We have then created the target directory where we want to copy all of these into. And now we are actually performing that copy operation. Okay, so we're at that point. So let's run this and see how it works. So Python get game data, and then we're passing data and target. I hit enter, and when I look in target here, you can see I now have hello world, rock, paper, scissors, and Simon Says with the contents of those directories because I just copied them in. Perfect. So now let me delete this, and we can continue. So the next thing I want to do is write a JSON file that just has some metadata about the different games. So what the game directory names are and how many of them there are. This is fairly straightforward. So let me create a function. I'll say make JSON metadata file. And here I will just take my path. So what do I want the file to be, or where do I want it to be? And then I will take my game dirs. Okay. Now here, I'm going to say that my data, this is the data I want to write into the JSON file. is going to be equal to, well, I will say my game names is simply my game directories, and I will say number of games, and this will be the len of my game dirs. Very straightforward, not the most useful data, but just want to show you how we write JSON. So now there's a few ways to do this, but the preferred method is to do the following. I'm going to say with open path in W mode, W stands for write. This will override the file if it already exists. If you wanted to read the file, you'd use R. So I want to write and override if it exists. So I'm using W, and I'm going to say as F, and then I'm going to say JSON dot dump, and I'm going to dump my data into my file. Now, if you've ever seen JSON be used before with dump S stands for dump string, and that's going to dump the JSON data you have into a string. We don't want that. We want to dump it into a file, or just really save it into a file. So we pass the data that we want to save, which in this case is a Python dictionary, which can kind of be represented as a JSON object. And we want to save it into this file object that I'm opening using something known as a context manager. Now, the reason I use this is because as soon as we're outside of this with, we are automatically going to have the file closed for us. If we didn't use with, we would have to manually close the file, and there can be some problems doing that, especially if an error occurs before we're able to close the file. We can have kind of a memory leak going on, so it's just preferred to use this. It's referred to as a context manager that just makes sure your cleanup operations happen no matter what, essentially. Okay, so we have this JSON metadata file, so let me copy this function. Let's paste it here. We'll say make JSON metadata file, and now we need to pass a path that we want to use. So I'll say JSON underscore path is equal to os.path.join, and I will join my target path with my metadata.json name. So I've just come up with this name. You can name it anything you want. And then I will pass here the JSON path and my new game dirs. Right, there we go. Okay, so let's run this again and see if it creates the JSON file. Okay, go to target, and notice we now have our JSON file. If I save, it will auto format here, and you can see we have our game names and our number of games. Fantastic. Okay, so let me delete that. All right, now that we have done that, I need to show you how we can compile this Go code and how we can run the Go code. All right, so let's write a function here that will allow us to compile the code inside of a directory. Now, let me just space out my functions here so they're a bit easier to read. Okay, and let's do it here. So define, and this will be compile game code. Now here, we'll take a path, which will be the path to the directory we want to compile the code inside of. Now, what we need to do here is we need to locate or determine the name of the file that we want to compile. You know, no pun intended or rhyme intended there, but you know what I mean. So we have main, we have code, we have file. Now, in this case, we could hard code that, but we don't want to do that. We want to have this dynamic so it works with kind of any Go file, no matter what the name is. So essentially, we're going to look through the directories of our games, and we're going to search for any file that ends in .go, right? So let's create a variable here and say game code extension, and I'll just make this .go. So that's what we'll search for. Now, if we find that, then we'll compile that code. Now, we could compile all of the files that have that name, or we could compile just the first one. In this case, I'll just do the first one because we're assuming we only have a single code file in each of our directories. All right, so let's say code file name is equal to none. And then let's walk through this directory like we did before. So we're going to say root dirs files in os.walk our path, and this time we're only interested in the files. So I'm going to say for file in files, and let's not forget to break here at the end of our for loop so we only do this one time, not recursively. Okay, so for files in files, I'm going to say if the code, what did I even call this? Game code. Okay, game code extension. If the game code extension is in the file, then I will say my code, let's do this, my code file name is equal to file, and then I will break. Okay, that's actually all we need. I know I went fast there, but that's all we need to determine what the name of our code file is. So we loop through all of our files here, right? So for file and file, and we say, okay, if this .go extension is associated with the file, then we'll say code file name is equal to file. And then we'll break, which means we'll just find the first one. We don't need to continue looking. Now, what I just realized, though, is that this could be a little flawed because I could technically have a file that's like .go.py. I know that would be a weird name, but that wouldn't be a .go file. That would be a Python file, right? Well, I think that would be a Python file, but it would be a bit weird either way if we had something like that. So what I'm going to do instead is use a little bit of a better way of doing this. I'm going to say if file.ends with. So I'm going to check if this is at the end of the file. I think that's a better way to do this check. Okay, perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that we did have a code file. If we don't have one, I'm going to return. If we do have one, then I'm going to run the command to compile this. So I'm going to say if the code file name is none, then just return, just so that we don't get an error when we try to compile a file that doesn't exist. Now we need to actually compile the file. So the first thing I'm going to do is say my command is equal to, and then I'm going to make a variable up here, which will be my compile command. So I'm going to say game compile command. Now, the way you write these commands is just in an array of, or I keep saying array, in a list of strings that represent the commands that you need to run. So it's going to be go and then build. So this is the command, go build, then whatever the name of the file is. So this is my like base command. So I'm going to say my command is equal to my game compile command plus, and then I'm going to put another list here, and I'm going to add inside of here the code file name. Now, what this will do is make the command be go build, and then whatever the file name is. Then I can pass this to a function that I'm going to write, which will just run any command that I pass it. So we're going to say run command. We do actually need the path that we want to be running this command from. Okay. So now I'm going to say that our current working directory is equal to os.getcwd. Is that what it is? Getcwd? Yes, that's correct. And I'm going to show you how we change our working directory into this path. The reason for that is that I need to run this command. Well, I don't need to, but I'm going to run this command directly in the directory where our game code is. So rather than being in the directory where my Python script was run, I'm going to change into that directory, run the command, and then change back to a different directory, just to show you how you do that. So I'm going to say os chdir, which stands for change directory, and I'm going to change into the path directory. Then I am going to go and run the command. Now, to run the command, we're going to use the subprocess command run, which I believe I imported from up here. Yes, I did. So we're going to say run, and we're going to run our command, and we're going to say our standard output is equal to pipe, and our standard input is equal to pipe, and I'm going to say universal new lines is equal to true. Now, this is where the command gets a little bit complicated, right? What does all this mean? Well, the standard output and the standard input is the location where the command is, well, accepting input and spitting out the output. Now, pipe is kind of this special thing that we can use that makes a bridge between our Python code and the process that we're using to run this command. Now, I'm not really going to explain it more than that, but just understand that that's why we're putting it here. It essentially allows us to communicate between the process that can actually run this special command, because this command is not a Python built-in command, right? Like this is a command we just run in our terminal or in our command prompt. Again, you don't have to understand it. Maybe that explanation was good, maybe it wasn't, but this is how you do it. You import run and pipe from subprocess. You pass the command. Again, the command is just going to be an array of all of the different words that are in that command, or a list of all of the different commands. And then if you wanted the result, it will be given to you in this result variable. So you could print out the result. You could read it in as a JSON object, blah, blah, blah. You could do whatever you want, and you could see what that result is. And in fact, we'll print out the result just so you can see what it looks like. So I'll say compile result like that. Okay, now the last thing we'll do, just as good practice, is we're going to change our directory back to the current working directory we were in before we ran, or before we changed directories into this path, just to make sure when we run this command another time, we don't get any potential errors, okay? So we got the working directory we were in, changed into this path directory, ran the command, and then we went back into whatever the previous directory was, just so that we don't have any potential problems here. Now we need to call this function. So we'll say run command and path. That's actually fine. We can just pass those values. Great. So now where do we call our compile game code function? Well, we're going to call that from inside of our copy here. So I'm going to say compile game code, and I will compile game code in the destination path. Because once we've done the copy and overwrite, once this is finished, now that directory exists, let's compile the game code, then move on to the next directories. So at this point, the project is pretty much finished. Let's run it though. Make sure it works. Okay, compile result, and notice it gives you kind of this like result object, right? I'm not going to, again, kind of dig into exactly how this works, but you can see that if you wanted to look at the standard out, then it would be std out from this compiled process, or sorry, not compiled, completed process. And if this had any result, like if there was an error, you'd be able to see it there. And the return code would most likely be an error return code as well. Now let's look at target here. So we have target, we have hello world, and now notice inside of my directories, I have my compiled code, right? I have main.exe, code.exe, file.exe, etc. If you were on Mac or Linux, you would get, I believe, a .sh file or an executable file on your operating system. It would be different than if you were on Windows. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap up the video here. All of this code will be available on GitHub. I'll also zoom out a bit and kind of slowly scroll through in case any of you want to pause the video and have a look at any of the lines here. But I thought this was a useful project just to teach you some basic kind of automation. I don't want to call it automation, scripting, syntax, tools, commands you can use in Python. I write code like this all the time in Python. It's really helpful. This is kind of my go-to language when I need to do like file or file system operations. So hopefully you guys found some value from this. And of course, if you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. You guys can check out my programming expert course if you want to learn how to become a Python programmer or a software engineer as fast as possible. And I look forward to seeing you in another YouTube video.